It was Paul who said, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible is put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. Before we get into the teaching of our beloved Nada this morning, I would like to just have a little preference, something before that, which will enhance what she has to say. So I would like to ask Serapis Bey to share with us just a bit about that seamless garment that we shall be wearing. You know, you can't take your physical body with you. It has to become a spiritual body. And therefore, what is this spiritual body that we are supposedly developing day by day? This is what she's going to be talking about. But Serapis puts it this way: just as your tube of light is woven of the great redundant God energies which answer every call, just as a violet flame pulses through all who call upon the name of the Lord and visualize this beautiful flame, so does God answer the call of man to commence the weaving of his deathless solar body. This body of light is begun in the heart of your God presence, and it is spun out of the light of the sun of the presence, as man below consciously invokes the holy energies of God. These are sent to him where they are focused in the threefold flame within the heart. And then raised back through the top of his head, up the silver cord, into the hands of the Holy Christ self for transmittal to the heart of the presence, where the garment is gradually woven as the wedding garment of the Lord. Only the purified energies of their hearts can be returned to the heart of the presence, so that God may actually create a garment of pure light with which the aspiring soul may be clothed. Let me break in here. If you ever see a spiritual being, usually you will find him in a robe. But the robe is not of the physical. It is the spiritual flowing of his light body. How do you make that? This is what he's talking about. He said, therefore, only those energies of the presence which are retained by man in purity and in love are a worthy offering which may be returned to God for the preservation of man's immortality. This garment of light possesses the power of levitation, but it also possesses conformity to the outer and inner self. It's the spiritual self, the God self. It conforms to the inner self because it is spun from the energies of God and the original pristine pattern of God for each life stream. Everybody, no, I'm sorry. Embodying within itself, therefore, the principles of victory. It holds with the presence and with all God magnificent, possessing also conformity to the human. It is able to conform to the highest in man of the divine nature, which he has externalized in the world of form. And it finds an anchor point in the human octave through all the qualities of the character of man, which is congruent with the divine. The point we're after here is, why is it so important to love? What are we really doing as we become more and more the manifestation of the divine? And how do we control this? This is what we want to discuss now, as we discuss Nada's teaching recorded in volume 14, number 20 of the Pearls of Wisdom. She says the key to happiness is to be found in the correct use of the power of love. Just as the true concept of love becomes a garment to clothe the nakedness of man, so the false concepts about love tear from man the covering he already has, leaving him tattered, an object of pity. Wrongly qualified love is a drain down which the energies of humanity flow. Rightly qualified love becomes the wings of the soul that lift the consciousness of humanity into a state of cosmic bliss. Seldom in the former state. Does that make sense? Go to San Francisco and watch the homeless ones. Pity those who have no longer the high spiritual tuning. It's all drained down. They are decrepit beings. Go to the mountain hideouts of those who are disciplined to become God. And you see not pity, but joy, oneness, and so on. When we get out of love, that light drains off of us. It's as Paul was saying, it's, how do you say it? In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, that which is incorruptible moves forward. So when we corrupt love, that which is the high vibration is no longer there. Because she says, beloved ones, the consciousness of man cannot be receptive to good and evil simultaneously. The consciousness of man cannot be receptive to good good and evil simultaneously. So when you get down in the dumps and you have a bad day, we have two choices: to get on top of it by stopping and tuning and rising above it, or to go on in our the corruptible part and go on down slippery. It's a slippery slope on down away from that tuning. You can't be in both places at the same time. And thus, for the person who has illumination, and that should include all of us, the moment you become out of attunement, you should stop, take a moment, and tune. This morning in our morning prayer, we started out by saying, nada, nada, nada. Often I say, Lanello, Lanello, Lanello. Immediately my consciousness is raised to Lanello. Immediately our consciousness is raised to nada. Who are you close to? Begin to use the name that keys us into that higher frequency. There is no excuse for anyone who understands tuning to have a bad day. It shows our lack of discipline. When we have a bad day, we should go off into a corner by ourselves, close the door, and tune until we are in tune with that higher frequency. He said, by his preferences and his choices, man determines the state of his soul. By his preferences and his choices, man determines the state of his soul. She says the ingesting of putrid novels and psychic episodes involving the lives of others or the figments of some author's imagination does not produce the fruit of happiness. Many of the works of modern fiction writers are transient charades based on man's supposed need for lurid entertainment. If the consciousness is creative, vibrant with the joy of the living God, as it rightfully was endowed, does it then require additional stimulus from without and forms of entertainment based on the escapades of the human consciousness? It's a good question. One that we can obviously watch day by day on the streets of life. Those individuals who like to watch the videos of the day, the bloody ones, you know, the kind of games they have now, video games, where you can chop somebody's head off and the blood flows, and we get so used to it that we can turn around and do it to a human being and not be bothered. There is no joy there. There is only hatred, resentment, hurt, etc. But if we turn on to the great videos, lifting us into the presence, then we have the other side of life. If you're going to be thinking in terms of your eternality, then you must take seriously what she has been saying here. You cannot think both evil and good at the same time. You can't be in a loving relationship and be full of hatred or anger or whatever. There's two sides. You can't be on both sides at the same time. And the trick is, how do you choose the one without being influenced with the other one? And this is what we were talking about earlier. How do you create the environment whereby you can leave the physical then and have the high spiritual energy already tuned in? We call that the ascension. So little do individuals understand the laws governing the flow of energy so freely given unto them, for which they are truly accountable. Now, it's my understanding when we were first created, we were given so much of a bank account of energy. And in our different lives, our different incarnations, we use that energy, and we have to account for that energy. And when we use it for the negative and it's not replenished because it's from the negative side, we eventually run out of that energy. And when we run out of that energy, that's what they call the second death. And we lose our individuality. But when we're working on the other side of the coin, the more you give, the more comes back to you again, because it recreates. It's an everlasting thing. So one day, when there dawns upon the consciousness of humanity a greater understanding of the source of all energy, they will realize the importance of qualifying their thoughts and their feelings according to the patterns that resemble the source. The difference between those on the right side, where you have love, joy, harmony, etc., versus the other side, where you have anger, resentment, hurt, fear, etc. When we understand the responsibility we have of using that energy in a way which it increases rather than just decreases. This is an important thing she's saying. And they will realize that these patterns are almost universally distorted in the entertainment media of the day. We have been taught very, very much how important Hollywood is. And whenever you think of Hollywood, you think of the great movies that have been out, of Moses and of etc. But now we begin to see the other side of this coin. The kind of movies where the one side is they go out hunting the other side. The so-called elite are now going out for the fun of it to see if they can kill the conservative. The newest movie out. Big stuff. You say, what will that result? When you look behind the scenes, you find that Hollywood, now there are some exceptions, there are some Christian people there, but you are finding Hollywood is being moved by Satanists, people who actually, before they start the movie production, have a worship service in which they call to Satan to inspire them. These are the people who also are heavily involved in child molestation. And so it comes through their movies. And so the movies inspire the people, the populace. And so we see all of the society going down and down, more and more anger, more and more resentment, all of this stuff, because God is not welcome anymore. Look at what's happening. A man's name is put up to be a judge. And if he's a devout Christian, he's turned down because they wouldn't want a Christian in a position of being a judge. It's becoming a very difficult thing. A teacher being turned away because they are a Christian. Now, it's okay if they're a Muslim, no problem there, or a Jew, but even Jews are having a problem because our society is becoming more and more satanic. We kill our babies before they're born, and even now, after they're born. If the baby is born, the doctor holds the baby and says, do you want it or not? If the mother says, no, I don't want it, the baby's neck is snapped. Satanism at its finest. It's time we stop and take a look at what is life. How beautiful are the thoughts of God, but how seldom do humanity in their strata of consciousness actually pause to give consideration to God's thoughts. The very idea of being entertained by his thoughts seems startling to man. But when they pause long enough in their busyness to ponder upon the flow of divine love into their consciousness, when they consider the magnitude of the divine intent, they are almost immediately polarized to a Godward movement. If they have any question in life, if you could just stop and ask. We had a situation here just the other day. Somebody wanted to sell us something for around the base of our house. So he came and gave us an estimate. But even before the estimate, I looked upward and I said, Father, what do you think? And I heard, no, because what's coming ahead, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So we should not be, we who say we believe in God and the masters and so on, we should not be floating, trying to find an answer, but rather tune our thoughts to God. Listen, see what he has to say. Because the moment you stop and you ask, your energies are flowing Godward. And this is why it's so important to notice what she's saying. She said, then no unhappiness can come nigh their door, and they are able to adjust to all of life's situations in perfect divine order. No longer is it a question of not liking what the day brings, but the understanding that whatever happens, even a matter involving karmic return, wherein they become the recipients of that misqualified energy which they had formerly set out, theirs is to joyously balance life's energy, to set it free and thereby free themselves and all of life forever from whatever condition they at one time sent out into the world. I'll never forget, we were in a conference in Norway. And after the conference, we were sharing our feelings and so on. And somebody said, "Oh, Carl, you really need to come and visit a certain woman." It was quite a ways away, and therefore I wasn't able to do it. But they tell me she is so full of joy and happiness, and yet she's bedridden, moving toward death herself. But she had so much joy and happiness, even though she was in misery, that this city or the town they lived in, people would come by, not so much to what they could give to that woman, but she was giving to them. They came just to be in her presence, her joy, her happiness, her sense of oneness with the Spirit. He said, "Carl, you never met a woman like this." Yes, I would love to have gone and spent some time with her, because here was one who really knew what Nada was talking about here. No longer is it a question of not liking what the day brings. You know what? We're used to, if we don't have a good day, we complain. Why do I have to go through this kind of stuff all the time? Why is this guy doing this to me? Why should I feel bad here? Rather than giving God the praises, rising above the situation, thinking in terms of what you are sowing for when you pass on, whether you're going to have enough flow of spirit to have created the gown for you. This is important. If you can see the end where you're going, and you have enough discipline to say, "I'm not going to be here. I want to be in a higher vibration." And we stop and we tune in and we begin to have a daily, moment by moment relationship with the Spirit, with an angel, with a master, with Father, Mother, God, with our own higher self, wherein they become the recipients of that misqualified energy which they had formerly sent out, theirs to the joyous balance of life's energy to set it free and thereby free themselves and all life forever from whatever condition they at one time sent out into the world. It really doesn't matter how one feels. What matters is, can you tune in and rise above it? You've heard the comment. There was a little boy who was carrying his heavier brother, bigger brother, because he broke his leg or something. And they said, "How are you carrying him?" And he said, "He's not heavy. He's not heavy." It's amazing how we can rise above the situation. She says, "In heaven's name, beloved ones, understand that by cosmic law, God himself is not required to wash the dirty linen of humanity. One day he gave man the gift of himself, of his consciousness, simply because humanity have changed that consciousness until it has become old and familiar, although often undesirable. There is no reason why humanity should continually repeat the same mistakes. Now, when the individual becomes determined that he is no longer going to submit to the deprecations or the devastation of the human consciousness, when the soul of man is recognized as the vehicle of the living God, he is able to summon the strength to cast off those undesirable thoughts and feelings that formerly troubled his mind or possessed his mind. It's very difficult to make the switch. It's like trying to get rid of a thought that you don't want. You can't do it. Say, oh, I can't think of that. I can't think of it. I gotta get rid of this. I can't think of it. It becomes stronger. The only way you can change is to replace it. How do you replace it? Praise God. Praise the Lord Almighty. Think in terms of the angel at your side. Begin to raise your thoughts and replace all the old stuff. And eventually, if you stick to it, the old stuff drops away because you're not giving it any energy anymore. You give the energy to that which you want, the side of the coin you want. So you start out the day, lo, I am come to do thy will, O God. Lo, I am come to do thy will, O God. Oh God, you are so magnificent. Oh God, you are so magnificent. You do this for a little while and all the other stuff drops away. This is the teaching. Become that which you really want. Isn't it marvelous, beloved ones, she says, that freedom can come unto mankind as naturally as the unfolding of the petals of a pink rose. The soul is very delicate, yet at the same time it possesses great resiliency. The hardness of the diamond right within the cells of the fragrant petals. But the diamond shining virtue of heavenly reality, man clearly perceives at last that he holds within the chakras or the chalice of his own being all the wonder, perfection, and love that is in the universe. The emergence from the chrysalis can take place right where he is. You know what the chrysalis is? You have the worm, then he creates a cocoon, which is the chrysalis, and then out of the cocoon comes this beautiful butterfly. The emergence from the chrysalis can take place right where he is. He does not need to wander hither and thither upon the surface of the earth seeking Christ, albeit there are important things that he can do to carry the light to all humanity. What he's saying is you don't have to go to India to find a master there, for the master is within yourself. It's there already. He said the Christ is within him and requires development only in the sense that the Christ consciousness, the consciousness that was in Jesus Christ, must remold and remake the human consciousness until at last it no longer resembles its former self. For the old things are passed away and all things become new. And that's what I started out with. That imperfect must become perfect. You move from the physical into the spiritual reality. She said the spiritual garnering of holy wisdom from the heart of God requires the mind of a little child. The spiritual garnering of the holy wisdom from the heart of God requires the mind of a little child. All the sophistication of the world that has unfortunately become a part of the learning process has been a trick, and a very bad one at that, played upon mankind by the serpentine mind. What's the serpentine mind? In the dictionary it says, at the moment a soul can no longer ignore truth, but it can still maintain the pride that makes it realize, that makes it refuse to self-correct, even in the face of absolute truth. So one might say that the basic element of the serpentine mind is the relative definition of truth. But the real problem with the serpentine mind is that the refusal to self-correct, the refusal to self-correct. God is not devious, beloved hearts. He is as clear as a bell, pouring forth the notes of the magic flute of spiritual comprehension. It is one thing to be able to read the teachings of the masters. It is another thing to become the teaching of the masters. It is one thing to say, I am a disciple. It's another thing to become such a disciple, such a strong disciple, that one actually becomes the master by application of everything that the master thinks and does. Where are we along that line? Are we just saying, well, I believe in what the masters say, and we can quote them, but we don't see ourselves becoming so determined to become what we say we believe? He said that Christ consciousness leads the sheep of God to the still waters of true knowledge, where outer conditions can no longer affect man, for they find that all things are governed within themselves. Truly, man is a divine alchemist, rightfully compounding the facets of his life into the wondrous whole as God ordained. Truly, each man must bear his own burden. Yet there are so many in misunderstanding who would say, another bore it for me. I was raised with that. Jesus bears my sins. Jesus came. Therefore, I don't have to worry because Jesus did it for me. And so we go to church on Sunday and we praise God, and we go out to work on Monday and we stand at the water fountain saying all kinds of things that you would never say in church. Another bore it for me. Let them understand the real meaning of Savior as relating first to God, And then to the beloved Son, whose radiance universally enfolds everyone. Then at last, by consecration and effort, ourselves. By consecration and effort, the mantle of beingness falls upon the heart of the contrite in contrite majesty, as man finally realizes that he was made in the divine image. We become that divine image. Every moment of our day, we think of our own image being that which is of the divine nature, constantly working for that moment of transition where we become the very essence of God Himself. We are developing constantly that beautiful gown which we put on when we make our transition. Then she has a poem that she closes with. A rose so tall crowns us all. God's mercy round our feet. His light of love from above reveals man's life complete. No flaw can mar his reality. No blight can harm the soul. Before the heart, the rose does start to make all mankind whole. Domain of light and beauty, freedom rules the mind. The hand of Christ reality teaches now, be kind. I am all one, enfolding all. My light rays from above renew the heart, the divine spark for which the Christ does call. And then she closes by saying, devotedly to the need of mankind's perennial renewal of the Christ consciousness, the rose of Sharon. Perennial. What perennial? It means the infinite, constantly changing, or the perennial. The rose comes back every year. So she's saying the renewal of the Christ consciousness constantly, the rose of Sharon. And then she signs it by saying, I remain Nada of the heart of God, the Chohan of the sixth ray, member of the karmic board. Beloved Nada, we thank you for this beautiful, beautiful saying, this teaching that constantly challenges us to become more and more as you are. Bless us with that vision that demands that we move forward, ever changing into that Christ reality. Give us a sense of discipline that we might follow closely with you in the leadership, for we do ask it in the name Jesus Christ, in the name beloved Nada.